Picture this: a sterile hospital room, filled with the sounds of new life entering the world. The beeping of monitors, the encouraging voices of medical staff, and the cries of a newborn baby. This should be one of the most beautiful moments in any couple's life together. But what happened in room 314 at St. Mary's General Hospital on that cold February morning would haunt everyone present for the rest of their lives. Because in the span of just 30 seconds, the miracle of birth became a scene of unthinkable horror. A husband who had been holding his wife's hand through contractions would become a killer. A delivery room would become a crime scene, and a newborn's first breath would be taken in a room where their mother had just drawn her last. How does love turn to rage so quickly that a man could take a life in the very place where life begins? How could years of marriage, months of preparing for their first child together, end in such devastating violence? Tonight, we're going to uncover the dark secrets that led to this tragedy, the hidden affair that had been eating away at their marriage, the lies that built up like pressure in a volcano, waiting to explode, and the warning signs that everyone around them missed or chose to ignore. By the end of this investigation, you'll understand how betrayal, jealousy, and rage combined to create the perfect storm. And maybe, just maybe, you'll recognize the warning signs we're about to explore before it's too late in your own life. But first, let me ask you this. If you discovered that the person you trusted most in the world had been living a double life, how would you react? Would you walk away, or would something darker take control? Keep that question in mind as we dive into one of the most shocking cases I've ever investigated. February 15th, 2023, 6:47 a.m. Dr. Rebecca Martinez had delivered hundreds of babies during her 15-year career as an obstetrician. She thought she'd seen everything: complicated births, emergency C-sections, even the occasional father fainting at the sight of blood. But nothing could have prepared her for what she witnessed that morning. Lisa Thompson had just given birth to a healthy baby girl. After 12 hours of labor, her husband, Jake Thompson, had been by her side the entire time, holding her hand, whispering encouragement. To everyone in the room, they looked like any other excited couple welcoming their first child. The baby's cries filled the room as Dr. Martinez placed the newborn on Lisa's chest. It should have been a moment of pure joy. Jake was crying, Lisa was exhausted but smiling, and the nursing staff was already preparing for the routine post-birth procedures. That's when everything changed. A nurse, Patricia Williams, was filling out paperwork when she made what seemed like an innocent comment. She glanced at the baby and said, "Oh my, she has such distinctive eyes. They're so light, almost gray. That's unusual." Jake Thompson, who had been beaming with pride just seconds before, suddenly went rigid. You see, Jake had dark brown eyes. Lisa had brown eyes. But this baby had eyes the color of storm clouds. The same color as Lisa's coworker, Ryan Bennett. What happened next unfolded in slow motion. According to the witnesses, Jake's face changed completely. The love in his eyes turned to something else, something cold, something dangerous. He looked at Lisa, then at the baby, then back at Lisa, and in a voice that Dr. Martinez later described as completely devoid of emotion, he asked a single question. "Whose baby is this, Lisa?" The room fell silent, except for the newborn's cries. Lisa's response would be the last words she ever spoke. "Jake, please, we can talk about this at home." In that moment, months of suspicion, weeks of doubt, and years of buried insecurities exploded into pure rage. Jake Thompson, a man who had never so much as raised his voice in public, grabbed a medical instrument from the nearby tray. What followed lasted only seconds, but the image would be burned into the minds of everyone present forever.
Welcome to Crime Vault, your home of true crime, dark mysteries, and deep investigations. In the heart of the city, where shadows dance and secrets sleep, the scales of justice are often tipped by unseen hands.
Dr. Martinez screamed for security. Nurse Williams threw herself over the baby to protect the newborn. Other staff members tried to restrain Jake, but it was already too late. By the time hospital security arrived, Lisa Thompson was dead, and Jake was standing over her body, the weapon still in his hand, tears streaming down his face. The first words he said to the security guards were not denials or excuses. They were, "She promised me this baby was mine. But here's what haunts me about this case, and what should terrify all of us. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Were there warning signs that everyone missed?" As I dug deeper into Jake and Lisa's relationship, I discovered that this explosion of violence didn't come out of nowhere. It had been building for months, maybe even years. The question isn't just what happened in that delivery room. The question is, why didn't anyone see it coming? Coming up, we're going to meet Jake and Lisa Thompson. On the surface, they seemed like the perfect American couple. But as you'll see, sometimes the most dangerous relationships are the ones that look normal from the outside. Jake Thompson was what people call a good guy. Born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, he was the kind of man who held doors open for strangers, helped elderly neighbors with their groceries, and never forgot his mother's birthday. At 32, he worked as a quality control supervisor at a manufacturing plant. Steady work, decent pay, nothing glamorous but reliable. His coworker described him as quiet but dependable, the kind of guy who brought donuts for the office on Fridays and never complained when he had to work overtime. He lived in the same modest 3-bedroom house he'd grown up in, which he'd inherited when his parents passed away in a car accident 5 years earlier. Jake's friends would tell you he was loyal to a fault. When his high school buddy Tommy went through a messy divorce, Jake let him crash on his couch for 6 months without asking for a dime. When his sister Megan needed help moving, Jake took vacation days to help her pack and drive the U-Haul across 3 states. But there was something else about Jake that people noticed, though they rarely talked about it openly. He was intense about relationships. His ex-girlfriend from college, Amanda Walsh, would later tell investigators that Jake was the most devoted boyfriend she'd ever had, but also the most suffocating. He remembered every anniversary, every first date, every meaningful conversation, but he also needed constant reassurance that she loved him. He would get anxious if she didn't text back within an hour. He would show up at her workplace unannounced, just to say hi. Amanda broke up with Jake after 2 years because, in her words, "I felt like I couldn't breathe." But Jake never saw it that way. In his mind, he was just being loving, attentive, the kind of partner every woman said she wanted. Lisa Martinez, who would later become Lisa Thompson, was Jake's opposite in almost every way. At 28, Lisa was vibrant, outgoing, and spontaneous. She worked in marketing for a mid-sized tech company and had a talent for making everyone around her feel special. She was the friend who organized surprise birthday parties, who remembered your favorite coffee order, who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 5 new friends. Lisa grew up in a family where love was expressed through grand gestures and dramatic emotions. Her parents, Maria and Carlos Martinez, had one of those passionate relationships. They fought loudly and loved even louder. Lisa learned early that relationships were supposed to be intense, full of ups and downs, chemistry and conflict. She'd had several serious relationships before Jake, including a 3-year engagement to her college boyfriend that ended when she caught him cheating. That betrayal left scars, but it also made her more guarded about trust, even though she rarely showed it. Here's what I want you to think about. Have you ever met a couple where one person seems to need more reassurance than the other? Where one partner is always asking, "Do you love me?" while the other is trying to maintain some independence? This dynamic isn't always dangerous, but when it's combined with certain other factors, jealousy, possessiveness, a history of abandonment, it can create a powder keg. When Jake and Lisa met at a mutual friend's barbecue in the summer of 2020, it seemed like fate. Jake was immediately smitten by Lisa's energy and warmth. Lisa was attracted to Jake's stability and devotion. After years of dating men who were unreliable or emotionally unavailable, Jake's constancy felt like a safe harbor. Their early relationship was intense in all the ways that feel romantic at first. Jake would drive across town just to bring Lisa soup when she was sick. Lisa would surprise Jake with tickets to baseball games and plan elaborate date nights. They moved in together after just 4 months. To their friends and families, they seemed happy. Jake had finally found someone who appreciated his devotion. Lisa had found someone who would never betray her trust. But as I dug deeper into their relationship, I found something troubling. Multiple people told me that Jake seemed to change after he and Lisa moved in together. He became more possessive, more controlling. He wanted to know where Lisa was going, who she was texting, why she needed to work late. And Lisa? Lisa started making excuses for Jake's behavior. She would tell her friends that he was just protective, that he cared about her safety, that his jealousy was actually romantic. Here's a question I want every viewer to ask themselves. When does love cross the line into control? When does caring become possessiveness? Because what I discovered about Jake and Lisa's relationship is that the warning signs were there from the very beginning. The problem is that both of them, and everyone around them, mistook red flags for romance. Explore how they met and fell in love. But more importantly, we're going to examine the early warning signs that everyone chose to ignore. Signs that, if recognized, might have saved Lisa's life. August 14th, a backyard barbecue at their mutual friend Casey's house. Lisa was standing by the grill, laughing at something Casey's husband had said, when she noticed Jake watching her from across the yard. Not in a creepy way, she would later tell her sister Carmen. Just interested, intrigued. Jake had been nursing the same beer for an hour, too nervous to approach the beautiful woman in the yellow sundress. Finally, Casey's husband Mark practically pushed him over to introduce them. Lisa, this is my buddy Jake from work. Jake, this is Lisa. She's the one who organized that charity drive I was telling you about. Their conversation flowed easily. Lisa was impressed that Jake actually listened when she talked, that he asked follow-up questions about her work, instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. Jake was mesmerized by Lisa's passion for everything, her job, her volunteer work, even her opinions about the best pizza toppings. They talked until the party ended, and when Jake asked for her number, Lisa didn't hesitate to give it to him. Their first date was at a quiet Italian restaurant downtown. Jake had made reservations for 7 p.m., but he arrived at 6:30 and waited in his car, checking his appearance in the rearview mirror every few minutes. When Lisa arrived, exactly on time, Jake was there to open her car door. I was impressed, Lisa later told her best friend Monica. He was such a gentleman. You don't see that much anymore. But here's what Lisa didn't mention to Monica, what she probably didn't even consciously notice at the time. Jake had already memorized her license plate number. He had looked up the restaurant's menu online and practiced conversation topics. He had even driven by her apartment building the night before, just to make sure he knew the best route to pick her up. During dinner, Jake asked Lisa about her previous relationships. When she mentioned her ex-fiancé's infidelity, Jake's entire demeanor changed. His jaw clenched, his hands tightened around his wine glass. "How could anyone cheat on someone like you?" he said, his voice filled with genuine anger. "If I ever found out someone I trusted was lying to me like that." He didn't finish the sentence, but Lisa found his protectiveness endearing. Here was a man who understood betrayal, who valued loyalty. What she didn't realize was that Jake's reaction was disproportionate. He was angry about something that had happened to a woman he'd just met, about a situation that had nothing to do with him. Their relationship moved quickly. By the third date, Jake was already talking about their future together. By the sixth date, he had introduced her to his sister Megan and his closest friends. By their 2-month anniversary, he had given her a key to his house. Lisa's friends started to express concerns, but gently. Monica mentioned that Jake seemed really intense about their relationship. Lisa's coworker Stephanie noticed that Jake would call or text during their lunch breaks, always wanting to know what Lisa was doing and who she was with. But Lisa brushed off their concerns. After years of dating men who were emotionally unavailable, Jake's attention felt like love. Here's where the first real red flag appeared, though nobody recognized it at the time. Lisa had planned a girls' night out for her friend Rachel's birthday. It was supposed to be dinner and drinks. Nothing wild, just catching up with friends she hadn't seen in months. She had told Jake about it weeks in advance. The day of the girls' night, Jake suddenly came down with what he called food poisoning. He was doubled over in pain, couldn't keep anything down, needed Lisa to take care of him. Lisa felt terrible leaving him, but Rachel had specifically requested that everyone be there, so she went. But she texted Jake constantly throughout the evening, checking on how he was feeling. The next morning, Jake was miraculously better, completely recovered, ready to go to work like nothing had happened. Monica later told investigators that this became a pattern. Whenever Lisa had plans that didn't include Jake, he would develop some kind of emergency. A migraine before her work Christmas party, a family crisis before her sister's wedding shower, car trouble when she planned to visit her parents. Lisa always chose Jake's needs over her other commitments. She told herself she was being a good girlfriend, a caring partner. What she didn't realize was that she was being slowly isolated from her support system. But the biggest red flag, the one that should have stopped everything, happened during their 4-month anniversary dinner. Lisa was telling Jake about a new coworker, Ryan Bennett, who had started in her department. Ryan was funny, creative, and had some great ideas for the marketing campaign they were working on together. Jake listened quietly, but Lisa noticed his jaw getting tighter with every detail she shared. Finally, he interrupted her. "Do you think he's attractive?" Lisa laughed, thinking he was joking. "Jake, I'm just talking about work stuff. That's not what I asked." "Do you think he's attractive?" The restaurant suddenly felt quieter. Other diners seemed farther away. Lisa realized that Jake was completely serious. "I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. He's just a coworker." Jake nodded, but his eyes had gone cold. He didn't speak for the rest of dinner. That night, Jake asked Lisa to promise him that she would never spend time alone with Ryan, just the two of them, for meetings, for lunch breaks, for anything. Lisa wanted to argue, wanted to point out how unreasonable and controlling this was. But Jake looked so hurt, so vulnerable. He told her about his ex-girlfriend Amanda, how she had eventually cheated on him with a coworker. He said he couldn't go through that kind of betrayal again. So Lisa promised. Here's what I need every viewer to understand. This was the moment. This was when Lisa should have walked away. When someone you're dating tries to control who you can and can't work with, who you can and can't spend time with, that's not love, that's control. But Lisa didn't see it that way. She saw a man who had been hurt before, who needed reassurance that she was different from the women who had betrayed him. She had no idea that she had just agreed to the first rule in what would become an increasingly restrictive prison. Lisa's promise to avoid spending time alone with Ryan Bennett would eventually become impossible to keep, and how Jake's obsession with her loyalty would drive them both toward a tragedy that could have been prevented. But first, I want to ask you something. Have you ever made compromises in a relationship that felt small at the time, but looking back you realize were huge red flags? Have you ever promised to avoid certain people or situations just to keep peace with a partner? Because what happened next shows us exactly why those compromises are so dangerous. September 2022, 18 months into their relationship. Lisa had been working late a lot, at least. That's what she told Jake. The truth was more complicated. Ryan Bennett had been promoted to senior marketing coordinator, and he and Lisa were now working together on the company's biggest campaign of the year. The project required long hours, creative brainstorming sessions, and yes, time alone together. Lisa had tried to keep her promise to Jake. For months she had made excuses to avoid one-on-one meetings with Ryan. She would invite other coworkers to join their discussions, or suggest meeting in public areas of the office where other people could see them. But it was becoming increasingly difficult, and Ryan was starting to notice. "Is everything okay?" he asked her one Thursday evening as she was packing up her desk. "You seem stressed lately." Lisa looked around the nearly empty office. Most of their coworkers had left hours ago. Being alone with Ryan felt like breaking a sacred promise, but she was exhausted from constantly trying to avoid normal work interactions. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice betrayed her. Ryan pulled up a chair next to her desk. "Look, I don't want to overstep, But I've noticed you seem uncomfortable whenever it's just the two of us working on something. If I've done something to make you feel weird, I want to fix it." Here's what Lisa should have said. "My boyfriend has issues with jealousy, and he's asked me not to spend time alone with male coworkers." Here's what she actually said. "You haven't done anything wrong. I'm just dealing with some personal stuff." Ryan nodded, but he didn't push. Instead, he did something that would change everything. He showed genuine concern without demanding details. He offered to help with the project over the weekend if she was feeling overwhelmed. He suggested they grab coffee the next morning to discuss the campaign timeline. Simple, professional gestures. But after months of walking on eggshells around Jake's jealousy, Ryan's easy companionship felt like a breath of fresh air. That coffee meeting turned into a 3-hour conversation, not about work, but about life, dreams, perspectives on everything from movies to philosophy. Lisa discovered that Ryan had a sharp sense of humor and an infectious laugh. More importantly, he listened to her ideas without trying to fix her problems or control her decisions. When Lisa got home that afternoon, Jake immediately sensed something different. "How was your morning?" he asked, but his tone was suspicious. "Good," Lisa said, trying to sound casual. "Just caught up on some work stuff." "With who?" Lisa felt her stomach tighten. She could tell the truth and face Jake's anger, or she could lie and avoid a confrontation. She chose the lie. "Just by myself. Quiet morning at the office." That lie, small and seemingly harmless, was the first crack in the foundation of their relationship, because once Lisa realized she could hide things from Jake, once she discovered that lying was easier than dealing with his jealousy, it became a pattern. Over the next few months, Lisa and Ryan's friendship deepened. They would grab lunch together, and Lisa would tell Jake she ate at her desk. They would stay after work to collaborate on projects, and Lisa would claim she was working alone. They would text each other funny memes and observations throughout the day, and Lisa would delete the conversations before going home. But here's what makes this case so tragic. Nothing romantic was happening between Lisa and Ryan, at least not at first. Ryan was simply being a good friend and colleague. Lisa was simply enjoying having someone in her life who didn't question her every move or demand constant reassurance about her feelings. The deception wasn't about an affair. It was about freedom. Lisa had forgotten what it felt like to have a conversation without being analyzed, to make plans without being questioned, to laugh without having to explain why something was funny. But Jake could sense that Lisa was pulling away, even if he couldn't pinpoint exactly why. She seemed distracted during their conversations. She was more protective of her phone. She had excuses for why she couldn't spend as much time together. His response was to become more controlling, not less. He started showing up at her office unannounced, claiming he was in the neighborhood and wanted to take her to lunch. He would call her multiple times during the workday, always with some urgent question or crisis that required her immediate attention. Lisa's coworkers began to notice. Her supervisor mentioned that Jake's frequent interruptions were becoming disruptive. Monica asked Lisa if everything was okay at home. And Ryan started to understand exactly what kind of relationship Lisa was in. The turning point came in December 2022, during the company's holiday party. Jake had agreed to attend as Lisa's +1, but he spent the entire evening watching her interact with her coworkers like a hawk, studying prey. When Lisa laughed at something Ryan said during a group conversation, Jake's hand tightened around his drink so hard that his knuckles went white. On the drive home, Jake was silent for 20 minutes before finally exploding. "So that's Ryan Bennett." Lisa's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean. The way you were looking at him, the way you were laughing at his jokes. Do you think I'm stupid?" What happened next would be the final straw for Lisa. Jake accused her of flirting, of embarrassing him in front of her coworkers, of making it obvious to everyone that she was attracted to another man. Lisa tried to defend herself, to explain that she was just being friendly, that group conversations weren't the same as private meetings. But Jake was beyond reason. He demanded that Lisa quit her job, that she find work somewhere else, away from Ryan and the other men who were clearly trying to steal her away from him. Lisa stared at Jake in shock. This wasn't love. This wasn't protection. This was paranoia and control taken to an extreme that she couldn't ignore anymore. For the first time in their relationship, Lisa said no. And that's when Lisa's secret life truly began. Because if Jake was going to accuse her of betraying him, regardless of her actual behavior, what was the point of continuing to sacrifice her happiness to appease his jealousy? 3 weeks later, at the company's New Year's Eve party, which Jake refused to attend, Ryan kissed Lisa in the parking lot as they walked to their cars. Lisa kissed him back. Coming up, we're going to explore how Lisa's emotional affair became physical, how her attempts to balance two different lives became increasingly impossible, and how Jake's suspicions evolved from paranoia into surveillance. But here's what I want you to think about. When a relationship becomes so controlling that normal friendships feel like betrayals, when you have to lie about innocent interactions to avoid confrontations, when you start to feel like you can't breathe in your own life, what would you do? Would you find the courage to leave? Or would you, like Lisa, try to find happiness wherever you could, even if it meant living a double life? January 2023. Jake Thompson had always been good at reading people. It came from years of quality control work. You learn to spot the small details that others miss, the tiny flaws that indicate bigger problems. And something was definitely wrong with Lisa. It started with little things. She would smile at her phone and then quickly put it face down when he entered the room. She had started working out more, buying new clothes, taking more care with her appearance. When he complimented her new haircut or her outfit, she would seem almost guilty. Lisa was also more affectionate than she had been in months, which might have reassured another man. But Jake's experience with relationships had taught him that guilt often manifested as overcompensation. On January 15th, Jake decided to trust his instincts. Lisa had left for work that morning after giving him an unusually passionate goodbye kiss. She had been wearing a new perfume, something lighter and more floral than her usual scent. When he asked about it, she said she was just trying something different. 20 minutes after Lisa left, Jake called in sick to work. Then he drove to Lisa's office building and parked across the street, where he could see the main entrance and the parking garage. He waited for 3 hours. At 11:47 a.m., he watched Lisa walk out of the building with Ryan Bennett. They were walking close together, not quite touching, but clearly comfortable in each other's space. They got into Ryan's car and drove away. Jake followed them. They went to a small cafe 20 minutes across town. Nowhere near Lisa's usual lunch spots. Nowhere Jake would ever think to look for her. Through the window, Jake watched Lisa laugh at something Ryan said, watched Ryan reach across the table and briefly touch her hand. It wasn't overtly romantic. To a casual observer, they might have looked like friends or colleagues having a business lunch. But Jake had been studying Lisa's body language for 2 years. He knew the difference between her polite smile and her genuine laugh. He knew how she tilted her head when she was truly interested in what someone was saying. Lisa was interested in Ryan Bennett in a way she hadn't been interested in Jake in months. Jake sat in his car outside that cafe for 45 minutes, taking pictures with his phone, making notes about their interactions. When Lisa and Ryan finally left, separately, Jake noted he followed Ryan back to the office building and then drove home. That evening, when Lisa returned from work at her usual time, Jake tested her. "How was your day, honey?" "Oh, you know, same old stuff. Boring meetings, paperwork. I barely left my desk." Lisa lied to his face with the same smile she had been giving Ryan Bennett 3 hours earlier. That night, after Lisa fell asleep, Jake went through her phone. He had been checking her messages periodically for months, but Lisa had always been careful to delete anything suspicious. This time, however, she had forgotten to clear her browser history. Jake found searches for how to delete text messages permanently, and can deleted text be recovered. He found visits to websites about emotional affairs and marriage counseling. Most damning of all, he found a Google search for Ryan Bennett that had been conducted at 2:17 a.m. the night before. Lisa had been lying awake, thinking about another man, while Jake slept beside her. Jake's surveillance became a daily routine. He would call in sick to work, or take vacation days, or claim he had doctor's appointments. He learned Lisa's patterns, Ryan's schedule, the routes they took when they met for their secret lunches. He discovered that they met at least twice a week, always at different locations, always careful not to be seen together. He watched them at a bookstore, browsing the same sections and quietly discussing their opinions. He saw them at a park, sitting on a bench and sharing coffee from the same thermos. And slowly, Jake watched his wife fall in love with another man. But Jake didn't confront Lisa. Not yet, because he needed to understand the full extent of her betrayal before he decided what to do about it. Instead, he became the perfect boyfriend again. He brought Lisa flowers, planned romantic dates, suggested they start talking about marriage and children. Lisa responded positively to his renewed attention, which only confirmed Jake's suspicions. She was overcompensating for her guilt. In March, Jake installed spyware on Lisa's phone. The software was virtually undetectable and gave him access to all of her communications, her location at any time of day, even her deleted messages and photos. What he discovered made his worst fears seem naive. Lisa and Ryan weren't just having an emotional affair. Their text messages were filled with inside jokes, intimate observations, and increasingly romantic language. They talked about their future together, about what it would be like if they were both free to be together openly. But the message that broke Jake's heart also gave him hope. Lisa was planning to break up with Ryan. The message, sent to Ryan on March 20th, read, "I can't keep doing this to Jake. He's a good man, and he deserves better than someone who's living a lie. I need to end things with him before we can move forward together." Ryan's response, "I understand. I don't want you to hurt him, but I also can't pretend I don't love you. Whatever you decide, I'll support you." Jake read that exchange 17 times. Lisa loved Ryan. She was planning to leave him, but she was also trying to do the right thing by ending their relationship honestly, instead of continuing the affair. For 48 hours, Jake waited for Lisa to have the conversation that would end their relationship, but it never came. Instead, on March 22nd, Lisa sent Ryan a different message. "I tried to bring it up last night, but Jake has been so sweet lately. He's talking about proposing, about starting a family. I can't destroy him right now. Maybe we should take a break from seeing each other until I figure this out." Ryan's reply, "I'll wait for you, Lisa, however long it takes." That's when Jake realized that Lisa was never going to choose him. She would continue the affair indefinitely, stringing both men along, rather than make a decision that might cause anyone pain. Jake had been patient. He had been understanding. He had been the perfect boyfriend, trying to win back a woman who had already given her heart to someone else. Now Jake decided it was time for a different approach. On March 25th, Jake proposed to Lisa at the same restaurant where they had their first date. Lisa said yes, tears streaming down her face. Later that night, she texted Ryan, "Jake proposed. I said yes. I'm so confused. I don't know what to do." Ryan didn't respond for 3 hours. When he finally did, his message was brief. "Congratulations. I hope you'll be happy." Lisa replied immediately, "I love you. That hasn't changed. I need more time to figure this out." Jake watched this entire exchange happen in real time through the spyware on Lisa's phone. His fiancée, the woman who had just agreed to marry him, was telling another man that she loved him. But Jake didn't say anything. He didn't confront Lisa or Ryan. He didn't call off the engagement. Instead, he started planning their wedding and their future together. He suggested they start trying to have a baby right away. He talked about buying a bigger house, about Lisa quitting her job to focus on being a mother. Lisa agreed to everything, probably out of guilt, probably hoping that commitment to their relationship would somehow resolve her feelings for Ryan. What Lisa didn't know was that Jake had no intention of building a future with a woman he couldn't trust. He was simply waiting for the right moment to make her pay for her betrayal. Coming up, we're going to explore how Lisa's pregnancy complicated everything for her, for Ryan, and most dangerously, for Jake. Because when Lisa discovered she was pregnant, it raised a question that would ultimately lead to tragedy. Whose baby was she carrying? May 2023. Lisa stared at the plastic test in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines, clear as day. She was pregnant. Under normal circumstances, this would have been cause for celebration. She and Jake had been trying for a baby since their engagement 2 months earlier. Jake had been talking constantly about starting a family, about how much he wanted to be a father, about how perfect their life together would be once they had children. But Lisa's circumstances were far from normal. Because while she had been making love to her fiancé, trying to conceive his child, she had also been continuing her affair with Ryan Bennett. Lisa sat on the bathroom floor of her office building, trying to calculate dates in her head. When was her last period? When had she been with Jake? When had she been with Ryan? The math was devastating. She could have conceived this baby with either man. Lisa's first instinct was to call Ryan, but she stopped herself. How do you tell the man you're having an affair with that you might be carrying his child or your fiancé's child, and you have no way of knowing which? Instead, she drove home and told Jake the news. Jake's reaction was everything she had expected and nothing she could handle. He picked her up and spun her around the living room, tears of joy streaming down his face. He immediately started making plans. They would move the wedding up. They would start looking for a bigger house. Lisa would quit her job and focus on being the best mother possible. "This is perfect," Jake kept saying. "This is exactly what we needed. Now we're going to be a real family." Lisa smiled and nodded and tried to ignore the voice in her head asking, "But whose family will we actually be?" That evening, while Jake was on the phone with his sister sharing the news, Lisa texted Ryan, "We need to talk. Tomorrow. It's important." They met at their usual cafe, but this time, Lisa could barely look at him. "I'm pregnant," she said without preamble. Ryan went completely still. "Jake's baby?" Lisa met his eyes for the first time. "I don't know." What followed was the most difficult conversation of Lisa's life. She explained the timeline, the uncertainty, the impossible situation she found herself in. Ryan listened without judgment, but she could see the pain in his eyes. "What do you want to do?" he finally asked. "I don't know," Lisa whispered. "If the baby is yours, Jake will know I've been lying to him about everything. If the baby is his, then I've been having an affair while carrying his child, which makes me just as terrible." Ryan reached across the table and took her hand. "We could figure this out together. There are tests, we could know for sure." Lisa pulled her hand away. "And then what? If it's your baby, I destroy Jake's life. If it's his baby, I've destroyed ours. Either way, someone gets hurt." For 2 weeks, Lisa agonized over her decision. She researched paternity testing, looked up information about when such tests could be safely performed during pregnancy. She made appointments with genetic counselors and then canceled them. Meanwhile, Jake was in full nesting mode. He had already started converting his home office into a nursery. He had bought pregnancy books and vitamins and a baby name book. Every conversation revolved around their future child and their perfect family life. Lisa felt like she was suffocating. But what Lisa didn't know was that Jake was watching her every move through the spyware on her phone. He had read her initial text to Ryan. He had tracked her location to the cafe where they met. He knew about her research into paternity testing. Jake knew there was a possibility that the baby Lisa was carrying wasn't his. And unlike Lisa, who was paralyzed by uncertainty, Jake was energized by having a clear problem to solve. Jake's first step was to learn everything he could about Ryan Bennett. He already knew Ryan's work schedule, his usual hangouts, his car and license plate number. But now Jake dug deeper. He created fake social media profiles and befriended Ryan's friends and coworkers. He learned that Ryan had broken up with his longtime girlfriend just 2 months after he started working with Lisa. He discovered that Ryan had been asking his friends for advice about a complicated relationship situation involving a woman who was engaged to someone else. Most importantly, Jake learned that Ryan had distinctive light gray eyes, unusual eyes that people always commented on. Jake began studying genetics, researching eye color inheritance patterns, learning about dominant and recessive traits. Both he and Lisa had brown eyes, which meant that any child of theirs should also have brown eyes, unless Lisa's family carried recessive genes for lighter colors. Jake discreetly questioned Lisa's mother about family eye color during a dinner at their house. Maria Martinez mentioned that her own father, Lisa's grandfather, had had beautiful light blue eyes, though the trait had skipped generations. So it was possible, Jake learned, for him and Lisa to have a child with light eyes. Possible, but unlikely. As Lisa's pregnancy progressed, Jake became obsessed with every detail. He went to every doctor's appointment, asked technical questions about fetal development, requested copies of every ultrasound image. When Lisa was 18 weeks pregnant, Jake suggested they find out the baby's gender. "I want to start planning," he told the ultrasound technician. "Decorating the nursery, picking out clothes. You know how it is." The technician smiled. "Congratulations, you're having a little girl." Jake squeezed Lisa's hand and smiled, but inside his mind was racing. A daughter, his daughter, or was she? That night, Jake broached a subject he had been thinking about for weeks. "Honey, I've been reading about genetic testing during pregnancy. Some of my coworkers were talking about how it can tell you about potential health issues, genetic disorders, that kind of thing." Lisa tensed immediately. "The doctor said everything looks normal. We don't need extra tests." "I know, but I just want to be sure. We could do one of those comprehensive panels that checks for everything, including paternity," Jake added casually, "just to have the information for medical records." Lisa stared at him. "Why would we need paternity testing? That's—" Jake backpedaled quickly, but the seed had been planted. "You're right. I'm sorry. I guess I'm just nervous about being a first-time father. I want everything to be perfect." But Lisa's reaction told Jake everything he needed to know. A woman who was certain about her baby's paternity would have been confused by the suggestion, maybe even offended. She wouldn't have been afraid. Lisa was afraid because she knew there was a reason to question the baby's paternity. Over the next few weeks, Jake watched Lisa become increasingly anxious about the pregnancy. She stopped talking about baby names, stopped planning nursery decorations, seemed almost reluctant to engage with the preparations that had excited her earlier. Meanwhile, Lisa's affair with Ryan had essentially ended. The stress of the pregnancy uncertainty had made it impossible for them to continue their relationship. They still worked together, but their personal communications had become minimal and strictly professional. Lisa was trying to convince herself that if she committed fully to Jake and their relationship, if she focused entirely on being the best partner and mother she could be, then somehow everything would work out. But Jake could see through her performance, and his patience was running out. In December 2022, when Lisa was 7 months pregnant, Jake made his final decision about how to handle the situation. He would wait until the baby was born. He would wait until he could see the child's features, particularly the eyes. And if there was any doubt about the baby's paternity, if the child looked anything like Ryan Bennett, then Jake would take matters into his own hands. He had been betrayed once before by his college girlfriend, Amanda. He had been foolish enough to forgive her, to try to work things out, only to be humiliated when she left him for the man she had been cheating with. He wasn't going to make that mistake again. But here's what makes this case so tragic. Jake never actually confirmed whether the baby was his or Ryan's. He never demanded a paternity test, never confronted Lisa directly about her affair, never gave her the opportunity to come clean about her relationship with Ryan. Instead, Jake spent months building a case in his mind, collecting evidence of betrayal, nurturing his anger and his plans for revenge. By the time Lisa went into labor on February 15, 2024, Jake had already decided that if he saw anything in that baby that reminded him of Ryan Bennett, he would make Lisa pay for her deception in the most final way possible. Coming up, we're going to walk through the events of that terrible morning in the delivery room, hour by hour, moment by moment, leading up to the split second when years of jealousy and suspicion exploded into irreversible violence. But I want you to think about something. Jake had months to make a different choice. He could have demanded honesty from Lisa. He could have insisted on a paternity test. He could have ended their relationship and walked away. Instead, he chose to wait for the moment when Lisa would be most vulnerable, most defenseless, to exact his revenge. What does that tell us about the kind of man Jake Thompson really was? February 15th, 2024. Lisa's contractions had been coming steadily for 6 hours. Jake had driven her to St. Mary's General Hospital through empty streets, holding her hand during every contraction, timing them on his phone, being the perfect supportive partner. But inside his mind, Jake was calculating a different kind of timeline. In a few hours, he would finally have his answer. He would see his daughter, or Ryan Bennett's daughter, and he would know the truth about the woman he had been planning to marry. Dr. Rebecca Martinez had delivered over 3,000 babies during her career. She prided herself on creating a calm, positive environment for new families during one of the most important moments of their lives. When she first met Jake and Lisa Thompson during their labor check-in, they seemed like a typical excited couple. Jake was attentive without being overbearing, asking informed questions about the delivery process. Lisa was nervous but focused, clearly ready to meet her baby. Dr. Martinez had no way of knowing that she was about to oversee the delivery of a child who would become the catalyst for murder. Lisa's labor progressed normally throughout the morning. Jake never left her side, feeding her ice chips when she requested them, helping her through breathing exercises, taking photos of the monitor when the baby's heartbeat was particularly strong. Nurse Patricia Williams, who had assisted with hundreds of deliveries, later told investigators that Jake seemed like one of the good ones. Engaged, supportive, genuinely excited about becoming a father. But Patricia also noticed something unusual. During the most intense contractions, when Lisa was focused entirely on managing her pain, Jake would stare at the fetal monitor with an expression that didn't match his supportive words. His jaw would clench, his hands would form fists, and his eyes would go cold. Patricia assumed he was just stressed about watching the woman he loved in pain. She had no idea he was preparing for the possibility that he was watching another man's child being born. At 6:30 a.m., Lisa was fully dilated and ready to push. "Okay, Lisa, this is it," Dr. Martinez said. "Your baby is ready to meet you. Jake, are you ready to be a dad?" Jake squeezed Lisa's hand and smiled. "I've been ready for this my whole life." But as Lisa began the final stage of labor, Jake positioned himself where he could see everything: the baby's head as it crowned, the first glimpse of facial features, and most importantly, the moment when the baby opened her eyes for the first time. At 6:47 a.m., baby Emma Thompson entered the world. She was perfect, 8 pounds, 2 ounces, 20 inches long, with a full head of dark hair and strong, healthy lungs that filled the delivery room with her cries. Dr. Martinez placed the baby on Lisa's chest for immediate skin-to-skin contact. Lisa was crying with relief and joy, exhausted but ecstatic. Jake was crying too, overwhelmed by the sight of this tiny person who was supposed to be his daughter. For 30 seconds, it was a scene of pure happiness. Then Patricia Williams made her fateful observation. "Oh my goodness," Patricia said, looking at the baby more closely as she prepared to take the newborn for initial cleaning and weighing. "She has the most unusual eyes. They're so light, almost gray. That's really rare for a newborn." The words hit the delivery room like a physical blow. Lisa went completely rigid. Dr. Martinez looked up from her post-delivery procedures, confused by the sudden tension in the room. And Jake stared at his daughter's face as if he were seeing a ghost. Because those eyes, those distinctive pale gray eyes, were identical to Ryan Bennett's eyes. "Jake?" Lisa whispered, recognizing the expression on his face. "Jake, what's wrong?" For 15 seconds, Jake said nothing. He just stared at the baby, then at Lisa, then back at the baby. The medical staff sensed that something was wrong, but they couldn't understand what. Patricia continued her routine, checking the baby's reflexes and vital signs. Dr. Martinez finished the post-delivery procedures. Everything was medically normal. But psychologically, emotionally, Jake Thompson was experiencing a complete breakdown. "Whose baby is this, Lisa?" The question came out in a voice that Lisa had never heard before. Cold, controlled, dangerous. "Jake, please," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "Not here. Not now. Whose baby is this?" Dr. Martinez looked between the couple, finally understanding that this wasn't just new parent jitters. Something serious was happening in her delivery room. "Mr. Thompson," she said carefully, "this is a very emotional time for new parents. Sometimes the intensity of the moment can—" "Doctor, please leave us alone for a moment," Jake said, never taking his eyes off Lisa. "I'm afraid I can't do that," Dr. Martinez replied. "We have post-delivery protocols that—" Jake turned to look at her, and Dr. Martinez later told investigators that the expression on his face made her blood run cold. "Lisa," Jake said, turning back to his fiancée, "I know about Ryan." Lisa's face went white. "Jake, please, we can talk about this at home. I know about the affair. I know about the lies. I know about every text message, every secret meeting, every time you chose him over me." The room was completely silent, except for the baby's cries. Patricia Williams moved instinctively closer to Lisa and the newborn, sensing danger, but not understanding its source. "I forgave you," Jake continued, his voice getting louder. "I proposed to you anyway. I planned our wedding, our life together, our family together. I convinced myself that the baby would fix everything." "But she's not my baby, is she, Lisa?" Lisa was crying now, clutching the newborn to her chest. "Jake, I don't know. I honestly don't know." "Yes, you do. Look at her eyes, Lisa. Look at her and tell me she's mine." Dr. Martinez reached for the emergency button that would summon security, but she was afraid that any sudden movement might escalate whatever was happening. Jake reached toward the medical tray beside Lisa's bed. "Mr. Thompson, please step back," Dr. Martinez said firmly. "Whatever is happening between you two, this is not the place." Jake's hand closed around a surgical scissors. What happened next lasted only seconds, but everyone present would replay those moments in their minds for the rest of their lives. Lisa saw the scissors in Jake's hand and understood immediately what was about to happen. She tried to roll away, to protect the baby, but she was still weak from delivery, still connected to medical equipment. Patricia Williams threw herself between Jake and Lisa, screaming for security. Dr. Martinez lunged for the emergency alarm, but Jake was faster than all of them. "She promised me this baby was mine," Jake said as the security guards restrained him. "She looked me in the eye and promised me." Lisa Thompson died at 6:51 a.m., 4 minutes after giving birth to her daughter. Baby Emma Thompson, whose parentage would later be confirmed through DNA testing, was indeed Jake's biological child. Jake had killed the mother of his own daughter because he couldn't accept the possibility that she might have belonged to someone else. But first, I need to ask you something. How many times in your life have you acted on assumptions rather than facts? How many times have you let jealousy or anger make decisions for you? Because what happened in that delivery room is the ultimate example of what happens when we let our worst impulses control our actions instead of seeking the truth. The sound that filled St. Mary's General Hospital at 6:51 a.m. on February 15, 2024, was unlike anything the staff had ever heard. It wasn't just the alarms, though those were blaring. It wasn't just the shouting of security guards and medical personnel, though the delivery room had erupted into chaos. It wasn't even Jake Thompson's anguished wailing as he was restrained and handcuffed. It was the silence that came after. The terrible, complete silence of a delivery room where new life and violent death had collided in the most unthinkable way possible. Dr. Rebecca Martinez performed CPR on Lisa Thompson for 12 minutes. She tried everything: chest compressions, defibrillation, emergency medications. The trauma team arrived within 3 minutes of the attack, bringing advanced life support equipment and surgical expertise. But the damage was too severe. Lisa had lost too much blood too quickly. At 7:03 a.m., Dr. Martinez officially pronounced Lisa Thompson dead. Meanwhile, baby Emma Thompson was fighting for her own life. The trauma of witnessing her mother's murder, combined with the stress of being separated from Lisa so abruptly after birth, had caused dangerous fluctuations in the newborn's vital signs. Emma was rushed to the neonatal intensive care unit, where a team of pediatric specialists worked to stabilize her condition. She would survive, but she would spend her first 3 weeks of life in the hospital, monitored around the clock. Jake Thompson offered no resistance as police officers led him away from the delivery room in handcuffs. He was completely catatonic, staring straight ahead, unresponsive to questions, seemingly unaware of what he had just done. The first thing Jake said to investigators was, "I need to know if the baby is mine." Detective Sarah Chen, who had been called to the scene, looked at Jake with a mixture of professional detachment and personal disgust. In 23 years of police work, she had never encountered a murder in a delivery room. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "you just killed your fiancée. Your daughter is fighting for her life in the NICU, and you're worried about a paternity test." Jake looked at her with complete sincerity. "I had to know the truth." The news of Lisa Thompson's murder spread through the hospital like wildfire. Within hours, it had reached the local media. By that evening, it was national news. Delivery room murder. Father kills new mother over paternity doubts. Hospital horror. Woman murdered minutes after giving birth. Jealous rage turns delivery into tragedy. The story had every element that captures public attention: betrayal, violence, innocent victims, and the perversion of what should have been a joyful moment into something horrific. But the media coverage also revealed something troubling about how society responds to domestic violence. 6 months after Jake Thompson was sentenced to life in prison, I sat down with Dr. Patricia Williams, not the nurse from the delivery room, but Dr. Patricia Williams, a domestic violence expert who had followed the case closely. The Thompson case is a perfect example of how domestic violence hides in plain sight. Dr. Williams told me, everyone who knew Jake and Lisa thought they had a normal relationship with normal problems. Nobody recognized that they were watching an abuser systematically isolate and control his victim. As I researched this case, I identified several warning signs that were present throughout Jake and Lisa's relationship. Warning signs that could have saved Lisa's life if anyone had recognized them and taken action. From the very beginning of their relationship, Jake needed constant confirmation of Lisa's feelings for him. He wanted to know where she was, who she was with, and what she was thinking at all times. Healthy partners don't need to monitor each other constantly, Dr. Williams explained. When someone demands to know your every move, that's not love, that's control. Lisa's friends noticed this pattern, but dismissed it as Jake being really into her. They thought his attention was romantic, rather than recognizing it as possessive behavior. Jake consistently found ways to interfere with Lisa's relationships with friends and family. He would get sick when she had plans with others, create emergencies that required her attention, or make her feel guilty for spending time away from him. Abusers systematically separate their victims from people who might notice what's happening or offer help, Dr. Williams said. They create situations where the victim has to choose between the relationship and other people, and they make the victim feel selfish for choosing anyone else. The Thompson case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about love, betrayal, and violence. It challenges us to examine our own relationships and our own assumptions about what's normal and what's dangerous. Most importantly, it reminds us that the line between love and obsession, between protection and control, between passion and violence, is thinner than we'd like to believe. Lisa Thompson should be alive today, watching her daughter take her first steps, teaching her to say mama, planning birthday parties and Christmas mornings and all the ordinary moments that make up a life. Instead, she's buried in a cemetery outside Columbus, Ohio, under a headstone that reads, "Beloved daughter and mother, her love lives on in Emma." Jake Thompson robbed his daughter of her mother, robbed Lisa of her future, and robbed himself of the possibility of redemption. All because he couldn't accept that the woman he claimed to love was a separate person with her own thoughts, feelings, and choices. If this story has resonated with you, if you recognize warning signs in your own life or in the life of someone you care about, please reach out for help. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7 at 1-800-799-7233. You deserve to be safe, respected, and free. And if you know someone who seems isolated from their support system, someone whose partner seems excessively controlling or jealous, don't wait for them to ask for help. Reach out, stay connected, let them know that you're there when they're ready. Because sometimes the difference between a tragic ending and a new beginning is simply knowing that someone cares enough to notice when love has become something dangerous. Thank you for watching Crime Vault. This case was one of the most difficult I've ever investigated, but it's also one of the most important. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. It's free, and it helps us continue bringing you these stories that matter. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear it, because awareness is the first step toward prevention, and prevention is the only way we can honor Lisa Thompson's memory. Until next time, stay safe, notice the red flags, and remember, real love doesn't hurt.